Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about 5 things I've learned in my homeschooling journey and 5 goals I have for the year 2025. So the first thing that I really learned was homeschooling is a lifestyle. It is going to affect almost every facet of your life, your spousal relationships, partnerships, friendships, family, work, the dynamic in your household, the way you do chores, the way you cook, the way you clean. Everything that you once did before will drastically be changed. Now, not in a bad way, but it is a major lifestyle change. For example, do you remember before you had kids and you didn't think you had that much time, but then you had kids and you realized, oh my gosh, before I had kids, I had so much time. And what did I do wasting all that time? That's kind of how I feel about homeschooling. I think, oh my gosh, I had so much time before, even though I worked, because homeschooling takes up a lot of time, not just the teaching, but the researching curriculum, the planning out the curriculum, getting everything ready. This is a very time-consuming thing. So it does, in a way, help if it's your hobby. It can take as little or as much time as you want it to take, but it definitely does take time and focus in a homeschool. The second thing that I learned is letting go of a curriculum when it's not working in your home or it's causing contention between you and one of your children. So I have 2 examples on this. The first is I love the Charlotte Mason language arts philosophy. I don't really follow Charlotte Mason in any other subjects except for language arts. That seems to be where I really gravitated towards. And so I started my daughter last year. We did narration, orally and written, and she did beautifully. She did wonderfully. I saw her starting to retain so much more and able to memorize and just be quicker on her feet. But it just got to a point where my daughter hated narrating. She would ask me every single time we were about to read something, am I going to have to narrate this? And she would just fight me on it, and it was so hard to get her to do it. It would take so much longer. She would do such a crappy job just because she didn't want to do it, and she was just trying to get it over with. It took me 3 or 4 months before I truly let go of narration. And we were using narration with Mostos Press Literature, which is a curriculum I love if you've watched any of my previous videos. And in each lesson, there's a short story and a long story. And she was narrating both. And the shorter one was okay, she could handle that, but the longer story, she could definitely narrate it, whether written or orally, and do it beautifully, but she just started to hate it and didn't want to do Mostos anymore. And I love Mostos. And I was realizing that I was going to have to give up narration and Mostos if I didn't just take a break. So I put Mostos aside for a little bit and I just stopped narrating. It just wasn't worth it. She wasn't getting anything out of it, and it was just causing so much contention between us. I was able to bring back Mostos later without narrating, and it's still a wonderful program. I had to let go of narration. She does narrate in our writing program, Writing and Rhetoric. It's about once a week she narrates, and it's just a short fable. She doesn't mind that. But aside from that, I don't ask her to narrate, and I've just kind of had to let that go. My second example was in math. My daughter really strongly disliked learning from me. She was very resistant, and it caused a very contentious dynamic between us. I stopped taking it personally when I realized that as her parent, she's the most comfortable with me expressing her frustrations. And math is a very frustrating subject, right? Like, if you don't know it right away and you're learning, it's stressful. Whereas a teacher at school, you're not going to express those frustrations in the same way because they're not a stranger, but they're not your parent. You don't necessarily feel safe doing that, so you kind of keep that in. Whereas a parent, you feel safe in that environment and you're able to express those frustrations, and it just causes some tension. So I did research. I did go down a math journey in this regard. You can watch my math journey video on it, but I was able to choose a different curriculum where she watched a video and I help her do the homework afterwards. I still have to show her things if she doesn't understand even after a video, but it's a much smaller degree and she's much more receptive to me teaching her. So that was another thing we had to let go of. And that leads me into the third thing that I learned, which is don't be afraid to outsource subjects. For math, I let it go and I realized that I was going to have to outsource this subject to some extent, and it's worked out beautifully. Your kids will benefit more without that lack of contention. Also, if you don't feel confident teaching a subject, there's nothing wrong with out-school, co-op, another type of class for your kid to learn the subject without you having to teach it if that's not something you're comfortable with. Now, I'm not saying that we are not capable of teaching any subject. I believe we're all capable of teaching our children any subject that we want. But sometimes if we're not comfortable doing it, our kids are going to sense that, and they really need our confidence. So this is kind of me just saying it's okay if you need to outsource things. That doesn't make you a bad homeschool parent. That doesn't make you incapable. It just means that you know your limits and you're trying to do your best for your child. So the fourth thing that I learned is don't get caught up on grade levels. I was kind of caught up with it when I started, and I'm so glad I let that go. So she is a fifth grader, but if she had been born 6 weeks later, she would have been in fourth grade this year. So I have realized she places about a semester behind. So I consider her technically starting fifth grade the beginning of January. And that's kind of where she has fallen in a lot of subjects. Now, some subjects she's ahead, some subjects she's ahead, some she's a little behind. But I have found the perfect place is where it's not too hard, but it's not too easy. It's just difficult enough, but they're able to learn and consistently move forward. If it's too easy, I find she's not really paying attention and grasping the concepts. If it's too hard, she just gets frustrated and isn't really taking in anything anyways. So that's something that's been really helpful. So for example, writing and rhetoric level 1, which we just finished, was for grades 3 to 4. And my daughter, if you go by my standards, just started fifth grade this semester, but technically she is in fifth grade. And that was a perfect place for her. It was just difficult enough with just enough challenge, and she loved it, flourished, and grew from that. Mostos Press, we're on level 4. We did start that later last year, but we have about another month left on level 4 before we start to level 5. And she is not behind. It is exactly where she should be. I feel like it's just enough challenge for her. I'm also using Beowulf grammar, which is considered 2nd to 6th grade. But some people could say it's a little too young for 5th grade, but it's perfect for her. I feel like that's one of the best benefits of homeschooling is being able to meet our children where they're at, because they're going to succeed so much quicker, so much faster, being able to be challenged at an appropriate level. Okay, so the last thing on my list is that even when you have a schedule, allow for flexibility. I have had some really good schedules and they work for a while, but then life changes. As our life ebbs and flows, our schedule has to be able to adapt with it. A schedule is not always going to work indefinitely. I feel like schedules are for seasons in life. Like I have a schedule and I posted about it that worked great for the beginning of fall, towards the end of fall, but then things changed. I realized that my daughter couldn't handle all the breaks that I had set for her. She had to continue homeschooling from start to finish until she was done without breaks because it was too hard for her to start again. I also realized that taking my walks in the morning and starting a little later in the morning didn't help her because she worked best earlier in the mornings. I also learned that me sitting and having breakfast with her and doing homeschool while we're having breakfast and other activities really helped her. I had to adapt and change things around in my day. And I'm sure this will continue to change. And this is not the only change in our schedule we've had to make. And that's hard, but I used to fight those changes. But now that I lean into them and am more adaptable, things flow better. Now, I'm not saying if your kid comes down, it's like, I hate math, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do school today. There's that's a different situation. But there's a situation where a certain flow works better than another flow and makes your day go more cohesively than more sporadic and more difficult to get your kids engaged. Because there are days where your kids are going to come downstairs and be like, I don't want to do homeschool. Oh my gosh, I've had those. But there are also those days where kids who go to a public school say, hey, I didn't want to go to school. So I feel like that's just a pretty common thing with kids. All right, so my goals for this year. My first goal is to have more fun and be more present. I like my lists. I like checking off my lists. I like getting through everything. And I've realized that I've been losing the fun in it recently. I'm just trying to check something off. And I need to be more present. Even though I'm there with her, I feel like I could definitely be more present. I could definitely be more silly and have more fun with it. So I'm definitely going to try to do that because I kind of have lost that as I've gone along the way. My second goal is I'm going to make time for more learning outside of the home. Field trips, park days, nature walks, anything that we can get out and make a teaching moment. I've realized in homeschooling that even those mundane moments that don't mean anything can become a teaching moment. And even a walk around the block can turn into several different teaching moments. So I just want to bring it out and have more fun. And that kind of coincides with my first goal, is being more present and having more fun, is letting go of having to follow a schedule in such a way that it doesn't allow for me to leave the house and have fun with my kids, in a fun, educational way. All right, so my third goal is to incorporate more board games into our homeschooling. We're definitely not new to board games. We played a lot of board games over the years. Board games is something I really enjoy. And now that Emma is a little older, we can play a lot more fun adult games, I guess. Ticket to Ride, Catan, Splendor, to mention a few. And so we've been playing on our own, on our free time, a lot more games as I've been trying to be more conscious about having more fun. And I'm realizing there's probably so many more games that I could bring in on an educational level. Not saying that just playing any board game isn't educational. You have to add up the math in order to get your score. You have to have strategy. You have to be thinking ahead. Sometimes there's puzzles. There's so many different aspects to it. Board gaming is truly an educational thing for kids, I think, and it's really fun. And I feel like I'm definitely going to find ways to continue to incorporate that. Like in the spring, we're going to be doing a science unit on birds, and there's already several fun bird games that I've already found to incorporate in that. There's also some fun math games that I've found that I'm going to bring in to our math routine. So I'm actually pretty excited about that because I do love board games. So my fourth goal for the year 2025 is to continue read alouds with my daughter, even though she's really delved into the world of independent reading. She's reading a book series, Keeper of the Lost Cities, that she's obsessed with. I've talked about this before, but she's almost done with the second book. The first book had 500 pages. The second one had 600, maybe a little more. She's about to start the third, which has 640 pages, and she reads it all the time. And so a lot of times at nighttime when we would go to read, she would just want to read that book. On top of that, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I was sick. My voice was gone for several days, and then it hurt to read. I would always cough. So I was having to have her read, and she just didn't want to do that. So it kind of fell by the wayside. And we've been a very consistent read aloud family for as long as we've been homeschooling. And so having a month where we weren't really doing a whole lot because of me being sick and her wanting to read her own books, I definitely felt something was missing from doing that. So my goal is to find books that are a little different than the ones that she's reading that will spark her interest and make her still want to do that read aloud with me. So we have started doing that again in the last few days, and I am really going to make an effort because I know as she gets older, she may want to do that less and less, but I am going to make sure I try and do that as long as I can. And my fifth goal for the year 2025 is to focus on my self-care. I feel like I say this all the time, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. Homeschooling requires so much from us, and it's a sacrifice I know that we all gladly give, but it is a sacrifice because we are putting our needs a lot of the time last. But when we can take that shower in the morning, go on that walk, do that meditation, do some deep breaths, take 10 minutes by ourselves and read a book. Go outside and look at the sun as the sun rises. Ground. Talk on the phone with a friend without feeling bad about it. Watch a TV show for 30 minutes. Anything, whatever fills your cup and makes you feel like you're getting something for yourself is really important. And I feel like burnout happens when we're not doing that. I was feeling burnt out, and I realized it's because I had given up my walks. I'm someone who goes outside and grounds every day and looks at the sun and does my ice baths and meditates in the morning and likes to go on a 1.5 or 2 mile walk every day. But that wasn't happening as much because homeschooling and life was taking over. And I felt it. I felt myself not feeling as good, not feeling as happy, not being as present, being more grumpy. And it's really something I want to focus on because I know if I'm in a good headspace, my whole house is doing better. My daughter's happier, my son's happier, my husband's happier. Everything is just so much better. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I would love to hear what have you guys learned in your homeschooling journey and what are some goals you have. Hope you guys had a great holiday season and I hope you have the best new year. I'll see you next year.